So one of the challenges that the Chicago has is that the zoning guide limits those uses. So let's take a look and see how uses are limited. So the way the guide is laid out is Chicago is divided into different zoning districts. So we have residential districts, business and commercial, downtown, manufacturing, and planned manufacturing. And we're going to discuss mostly business, commercial, manufacturing, and residential today. And then they organize the guide by the different categories. So you got art and animals, automobiles, building maintenance and business, construction, education, financial, food, funeral, hospitality, industrial, laundry, lodging and media, medical, personal services, recreation and civic, residential, retail sales, and smoking. And what Jane Jacobs says in Death and Life of American Cities is that dividing it into these uses doesn't make any sense at all. You're just picking words and randomly dividing it. Now in the suburbs, this might make sense. It might make more sense to when you have a square mile of housing and then a square mile of industrial or a square mile of business for it to be grouped together where things are really spread out. But in cities, she argues, this is not logical. In cities, you have so many different types of uses and types of buildings in each district, on every block, that it's okay to mix them together. What matters is that one particular business doesn't get too big and take up too much space, or that it has externalities such as noise or pollution that bothers people. So the question to ask for when you think about zoning is, what are the negatives from this business? And are they significant enough that they can't be near houses or they can't be near manufacturing or other businesses? So let's take a jump through the guide. We're not going to look at everything, but we'll look at a few of the categories together. So to start off with, we have art. Art studios, galleries, and photo supplies. And as you can see, they're limited from residential and from manufacturing. And so I ask why? Why can't you have art studios near homes or near manufacturing? It doesn't make any sense. That includes art galleries, photo stores, and photo studios. Those really should be everywhere. The next category is animal services, and this includes things like guard dogs and boarding and kennels, and it makes sense for these not to be near houses. You have loud barking dogs, some that could bite, and I do understand that restriction. Let's go down to the next category here. We're looking at automobile services like gas stations and car repairs, tire shops. For a lot of these, we do understand how we don't want them near houses. When you have a lot of cars, that means you have to store the cars. There's a lot of broken cars that might be dangerous in some way. We want those to be kept away. But maybe something like selling headlights or some basic tires and without putting them on the vehicles could be accommodated in business 1, business 2, or even a residential space. So I'm not sure the guide really reflects all the possibilities here. Let's go to our next category. We'll jump down here. We have building maintenance and cleaning. So cleaning services and building maintenance. And you gotta think that this is mostly offices and storage of supplies because most of these services require going out into the other business world. And so why aren't these allowed to be near homes? It's just gonna be an office where you explain your services and sell them, or where you store your gear. Maybe you'll have a van or two. Now, if you have tons of vehicles, again, we understand that can't be there, but the guide should be, the zoning rule should be how many vehicles are allowed. It shouldn't be we're just blanketly eliminating every single business for this type. Then you have to do a special process. That just doesn't make sense. And look at this gap. Why are they eliminated from downtown? Don't they need those things too? We'll jump to our down here to business services. So we have business trade schools, and these ones can be outdoor manufacturing, so welding, maybe woodworking. We have regular business trade schools, and none of these are allowed near residences either. And some of them aren't even allowed near business districts. So you do wonder why aren't they allowed? We want people to learn these trades. We want people to become plumbers and electricians, and they should be able to practice and have a business area where they can work on doing these and learn how to do them. So I definitely am against this zoning rule. Look at this one, day labor employment offices, those aren't even allowed. Computer services, they're not allowed. Those don't have any negative externalities. We're just trying to get people businesses. Those should be allowed near residences and downtown too. Office supplies, printing establishments, if they're at small scale, there's no negative externalities from those. Maybe ticketing agencies, you get a line around the block, that's a little bit of a nuisance, and I can understand that. So what if we had a rule like a certain number of customers is all you're allowed per hour or per day in certain neighborhoods? What about construction? Obviously, construction occurs everywhere, so whenever you're building things, and there's rules about it, like number of hours. But these specific services are a contractor office and shop or a board-up service. Why aren't these allowed more places? You can make rules that you can't make noise overnight and things. Maybe the reason it's so hard to find a contractor is they're not allowed to have an office. Look at this. They're only allowed in 6 different zones. They're not allowed in all these different zones. Building material sales, board-up services, that's like stacks of plywood and things. It seems like those should be allowed more places as well. People need those things in their homes. Hardware stores and locksmith shops, those are you're specifically going to when you're locked out of your house or when you need something for your house. Those should be allowed to be near your home. Obviously, if it's a really big one, I get it. You don't want it to be in a residential area, but we're talking about scale and size, and that's what the zoning guide should be about. It should be about how big something is, how much space you take, how high you stack things, how many customers you have, not just arbitrarily the name of it is what leads to the restriction. Let's go to the next category. We've got education and childcare. So we have more business trade school categories, martial arts, music schools. Again, we want these everywhere. We want kids learning. We want teenagers learning. That's what keeps them out of trouble. That's what gives them skills to get jobs. Why are we limiting where these can go? They're limited in the certain MD and the residential zones. Let's go down. Bakeries. These are all the food services. Coffee shops. We have a deli, food stores. None of these are allowed anywhere near homes. Some of these aren't allowed in downtown areas, and you wonder why. Don't we want people to get catering and delis and food stores? Again, if it's a huge operation, it makes sense. So if you have a certain number of employees or a certain number of vehicle requirement, then we understand not being allowed. But just arbitrary to limit the corner stores or the little delis or little coffee shops or being near homes is absolutely bonkers. Those add value. I would love to go across the street to get a coffee or to get a sandwich. And same with restaurants, those are limited. I'd get the slaughterhouses. I don't want, animals being slaughtered right across from where, I live, but it makes sense otherwise. Urban rooftop farms, why can't those be near homes where you're growing things for people to eat and then sell to them? That one doesn't make sense. We want people to eat healthy. I'm not sure this zoning guide lines up with our true values, especially the values put out by the city. Hospitality and liquor, we want to be able to have corner bars. In fact, there's a lot of those in residential areas. What you want to do is have a rule that says you can't have more than 1 per block or two per 3 blocks or something like that, but don't just arbitrarily limit it just because they're called a tavern. It doesn't make sense. That's an amenity that people enjoy and the market can set. Now, junkyards, absolutely, those are too loud. Even Jane Jacobs specifically calls those out as being a little bit of a nuisance, kind of like a gas station. You want that a little bit separated. And usually the natural free market is going to put those things on the outskirts anyway, where the land is less valuable. And the more intensified land uses, like businesses, are going to be closer to residences where they're more valuable anyway. So your zoning guide needs to be very simple in order to get that to work out, and just make some simple rules. So we have a lot of industrial uses, which I think they arguably should be away from residences, and they aren't allowed. But why aren't they even allowed in these business districts? I mean, that's a great place for them to go, especially if they're light manufacturing. One thing Jane Jacobs points out is when you pollute in the sky, the smoke goes everywhere. The air doesn't know these zones. So long as the immediate nuisances aren't bothering anyone on the block, what is the problem? Why do we have these rules? You need to ask yourself, what is the problem? And that's when you take a business and you separate it. And the city has other rules that are put in place. We have sound ordinances in place already, so you don't necessarily need the zoning guide to duplicate over them. So here's more industrial, which we kind of already said. It kind of makes sense already for those to be separated. What about laundry, dry cleaning, just the establishment or the plants? Don't we want those near where people live? That's where the dirty clothes come from. So that one I'm a little confused by. Again, long as you set it up in such a way that no one immediately is bothered, by the byproducts coming out of these businesses, let's put them near homes where people can access them. And make the rule, you can't release the smoke near people's doors and windows. You can't have loud noises near the sidewalk in the street. Make rules like that, but don't make rules like no dry cleaning allowed whatsoever. Doesn't make sense. Looking at lodging, we have a big problem with Airbnbs popping up because hotels are so expensive. I wonder why. Look at hotels and motels. They're not allowed in 5 different zones. If you were allowed to have smaller hotels, then that'd be a great way to bring in more, another competitor to the bigger hotels. And you'd probably get some better services and products out in the market too. The rules should be no loud noises at nighttime. The rules should be you can't use up, the street parking, things like that. You can make rules about, but just saying none, that really distorts the market. It makes for less vibrant neighborhoods. We're looking at like radio broadcasting, recording studios. Yeah, I understand not wanting a giant radio tower next to your house, but what's wrong with a recording studio? So long as it's soundproof, that'd be a cool thing to walk by the window and look through and see people recording. And then we got medical and optometrists. Those aren't even allowed in your houses. I don't know if you've been at the eye doctor. I have been. It's one of the most quiet, calm places in the world. What's wrong with walking down the block to the eye doctor? Same with medical services, just to get your checkup. Those should be everywhere. Why is healthcare so expensive in this country? Well, here's one reason. They're not even allowed to build clinics in a bunch of places. And so looking at personal services, now this is one of the most ridiculous categories in the Chicago zoning rules. Fingernail salons, hair braiding, massage, and tanning, not allowed to be near houses. There's some sort of restrictions here in the R1, in the B1, B2, and B3. It's like, why? What's the problem with people getting their nails done? What's the problem with them getting their hair braided anywhere? These should be allowed to be absolutely everywhere. They don't have any negative externalities. They don't cause any problems. Same with recreation. These are things we want people to do. It keeps them out of trouble, gives them something constructive to do. Chicago has one of the higher crimes for big cities in terms of the rates. Maybe one of the reasons is these restrictions that we don't allow for bowling alleys, pools, arcades, amusement establishments, even children's activity centers where kids can go to play. Those aren't even allowed to be near houses either. Now, I understand if you have a rule, you can't have a certain number of people or cars or sound, but just a blanket statement, none of these entertainment and recreation facilities at all, that's absolutely bonkers, absolutely ridiculous when you're talking about making a vibrant city full of life. So there's a whole bunch more recreation. We got health clubs, wagering facilities, skating rinks, theaters. Now the ones that are big and take up space, just like before we talked about, yeah, that makes sense. But what if you have a little comedy club? What if you have a little pool hall with just 2 tables? A health club where it just has a few treadmills and weight rooms? What is wrong with that being near a residential neighborhood? Look, it's not even allowed in a lot of the business districts as well. Absolutely ridiculous. Now Civic, we got like the mail service, the post office, they have tons of mail trucks, so I understand that not being allowed. And again, you could just say, if you have a lot of trucks, make a number, they're not allowed to be near residences. Even things that are these residential uses, artist space, assisted facilitating, why aren't those allowed to be near homes? Why aren't those allowed to be near manufacturing districts? Self-storage, I get. Those are huge, gigantic buildings, sometimes multi-story with tons of moving trucks and gates, kind of ugly. Those restrictions that make a little bit more sense. Retail space, you can't even sell musical instruments near homes, and it looks like there's even some more rules here at the PMDs with that. Why would there be any rules about where you sell musical instruments? That could happen anywhere. Look at watch repair, one of the quietest activities in the world. You can't even do that near a home. Can you do it near a manufacturing? Okay, good, you can. And then we have these smoking facilities, hookah bars, tobacco shops. Those aren't allowed, and that one makes more sense. There's a negative externality. The smoke goes right into people's faces. Now, even the hookah bar, you could probably be more accepting if you say, okay, as long as it's indoors and separate from the public, then what's the problem? A lot of these things, if there's a public health concern with the liquor, the hookah, and you do have some data behind that, maybe I understand trying to limit the number of them or the availability, and even potentially where they're near houses. But a lot of these, like watch repair, what is the public health benefit concern for that? Or the trade schools. There's a lot of these things which should definitely be promoted and be more widespread. Some of them are even good for the public health benefit. We were talking about being able to go exercise, being able to go get your coffee or your juice, or your being able to get fresh food from an urban roof. Why are there limitations on the zoning for that? See, the zoning guide is set up like the suburbs. It's set up like you have this giant space that you need everything separated. But the truth of the matter is that a city is full of density. It's full of so many different people, so many different types of buildings and uses of those buildings, and it's okay for them to mix and mingle. It's okay for them to be located near each other, so long as people aren't bothering other people. And this zoning guide goes way above and beyond what is necessary to restrict. There's a lot of natural restrictions in the market. People aren't going to want to go where things aren't suitable for them, and they will go where they are suitable. And so the market does a lot, and the city has a lot of other rules. We have sound ordinances. People do have rights to not be bothered. And so I think that this zoning guide needs to be looked at, and they need to take a red marker and then cross a lot of it out and make rules that make sense. Rules that answer the question, what is the problem that we're worried about? What is the concern that we have? Because really it is about size, it's about vehicle counts, it's about what those businesses look like. And if you can have a small little restaurant, at the corner of a residential block, there could be no problem. And that's why this guide needs to be axed and redone. I'm the Urban Wolf, and thank you, and have a great day.